So another episode of Side Bites, the podcast. Today I'm joined by Shahar Man, who's the CEO and co-founder of Backslash. Great to have you on. How are you?
I'm great. After a long flight coming from Tel Aviv to Vegas, but eventually we're here, and thank you so much for having me here.
You're welcome. We are here, and I've heard some nightmare stories of Israeli flights, right? So glad you could come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I wouldn't miss it. I mean, the situation is pretty bad, but I hope things will get calm very soon.
I hope so. And you guys, you have a booth here, right?
That's right.
Second year, you said.
That's
booth,
right.
Yeah. And that's Startup City?
Yes, it's in the very nice Startup City. We have a very central place there this year. And we're excited to see, all the people coming to BlackHat, excited from the startup area. So
yeah, it's a good vibe.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's start the podcast. The way I like to start it is just give the audience an idea of who you are and also the problem that Backslash solves.
Absolutely. So my name is Shahar Man, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Backslash. Previously, I was leading the engineering and product teams of a company called Aqua Security from the very beginning. It was a very interesting journey, coming from a big corporate SAP in my previous career journey into a very tiny startup back then in 2016.
Oh, wow. Were you one of the founding employees then?
Yeah. So I was, I guess, one of the first employees. We're still single-digit number of employees when we started it. So I was heading the engineering, a huge team of 3 or 4 people. And then we built a pretty big company, riding the very exciting wave of Docker security, Kubernetes security, trying to secure this very exciting infrastructure, and we were growing very fast. The engineering team came from very few people to around 150 in India and in Tel Aviv, and then the product team went worldwide. It was quite of a journey.
Yeah, awesome. And it brings you to Backslash, which is an interesting problem you guys are solving. Can you give the audience just a quick overview of what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. So, pandemic changed something in all of us. It made us think what we're going to do next in your career. It was a good time when Aqua was around 500 people, I guess. When I moved on, I got the blessing of my friends and founders, Amir and Dror, and also some of they were part of our investment team. And I started Backslash with the goal of changing the application security domain, which I, as a practitioner, VP engineering most of my career, were suffering for the last couple of decades. It's kind of sad that when I started my career and today, nothing has really changed in this domain. We need to scan our code, which is great. We need to find what's wrong with our code. We are doing it for compliance reasons, for other reasons. But we couldn't find an effective methodology to make it efficient to address the high priority risk versus just the list of vulnerabilities that the application security teams asked us to fix. And it's kind of sad that a whole industry, hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested, we're not able to solve this problem. What's funny? SQL injection, one of the most straightforward things in security, is still one of the top stubborn problems we see in the industry even today. We have our own database that we publish on our website, where you can see the top trending issues, and all of them. It's the SSRF, it's the past reversal of the world, SQL injection. Same thing as I started my career. Even got worse because more web development is going on today. So with that, I've decided to take this problem and kind of fell in love with the idea that we will be the one that are able to solve it. And solving it by mimicking the practices that have been implemented in my teams manually into a smart engine that does it for you. So this is how we engage with Backslash, and it's interesting to see how the technology is coming up to reality, and we started our first sales replacement of the previous technology, previous generation these days.
Great, very interesting. And so we'll cover the tech then. So how are you guys, how are you leveraging, I presume, AI, ML to do that? Can you talk us around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, even before we talk about AI and ML, There are very different approaches to address the prioritization problem in AppSec. Some of them decided to just let you know all the different issues you have in your code, and they move the problem to you. You have 1,000 issues you need to fix, and now you put in place a program that typically fails to triage, and it's very expensive to put your smartest people in the team just to triage and make it happen. Other more modern approaches, now called ASPM, brings a very lightweight single pane of glass to let you know what all the other application security platforms are telling you, and giving you very nice UI of what needs to be handled based on a CVSS score, EPSS score, very stateless scoring systems that helps you make sense a little bit and prioritize.
Sure.
Some of them are doing that with agents. So they have a very interesting logic that they're saying, let's see what's happening in the runtime environment, and based on that, we can go back to the developers and say, hey, this is running, this is not, and based on that, you need to fix. However, coming from a company like Aqua Security, I know it takes almost half a decade to stabilize a decent agent, and there's a lot of operational hassle around it. So the approach we took, we decided to build the engines from scratch altogether for SAST and SCA, and to replace this previous generation static analyzers with our own smart ones. And the way we're doing it is by understanding the very intimate application flows from the code statically, where you start your APIs until you sync them to the database. We merge this classic domain of SCA and SAST in our own engines that, as a result, we can have a very different insights, much more focused on what really needs to be fixed. And I'll give one example. Let's say you're consuming a framework or an open source, and as it happens, these frameworks bring in a lot of transitive dependencies. And based on that, many of the dependencies and packages that comes to your application are not even being used. So what typically happens, and what existing tools will tell you, go ahead and fix this 9.7 vulnerabilities in a package, and in the next sprint you'll get your best developer to find out how you fix it, only to find out this is not used by anyone. We just brought in the entire framework for another functionality in another package. So you just wasted everyone's time just for fixing that. So Backslash will surface only the ones that are actually being used, and there's a very low relation between the CVSS score to the actual risk that we see. That we can eliminate high CVSS score because they're not being used, versus a very innocent-looking medium ones that are on a very critical flow in your application that must be fixed immediately. So with that, that's the technology and how we bring it in. Of course, AI brings a lot of new challenges and complexity to the modern development environment, and it makes the plot thickens, and now with AI-generated code, it takes a lot more problems to solve, and the problem we're looking at goes and grows exponentially.
I can imagine, It's with the AI and AppSec and code, there's just so much around that. And you guys, the vision that you had initially with Backslash, what was that, and how has that changed as you built the business, or has that changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, when we started, we wanted, from vision perspective, we wanted to do the same thing for security, for the application security, what Agile did to development. So once you acknowledge, what Agile did as a movement of code development was to acknowledge you cannot complete everything in a single half year or one full year, and to expect to understand the results by the end. So let's just focus on the top features you need to execute on. So our vision is that once you acknowledge you will never fix your 60K vulnerabilities this year, it's not going to happen. So at least you make sure in every sprint security is being injected in that sprint with the highest risk and highest impact fixes you can bring into your application development. So we're trying to do an agile mindset using a very strong tool set into the application security development. And by the way, it doesn't stop there. Once we have this very unique engine, it's not only about how you prioritize your security issues, it's also about smart ways to fix them. Because one of the, let's say you get the list of things you need to fix.
Yeah.
So one of the problems is that once you want to patch a package into the next one, you have so many options of new versions, but you don't want to destabilize the system. So you want to take the minimum version that will still make sense and you get rid of the vulnerabilities, but would not, destabilize your entire app and run a long test. So by having the understanding of the application flows, we're able to give you a simulator of what if scenarios, if you go to this version or the other version, what is the next cleanest version you can take without just patching and checking it for a full sprint only to find out that you got new vulnerabilities introduced in the new one. And these new interesting features are coming up from a very different engines on the static code.
Yeah, and what's your take on engineering role versus security? Because there's a background as an engineer, right? Keen to hear your view on that and how you see engineering playing their role versus security.
Okay, so that's a very interesting one because I have I'm very opinionated about this thing. So, as an engineer, at the end of the day, you don't really care that much about security. You should care, but let's be honest with ourselves. Your passion is about generating new features and functionality for the company and fast. And the economic around it, your payroll, how you're being incentivized is around getting new features done. So security has always been a hustle for developers. And the 2 decades of experiment trying to educate developers of being more secured, I think that's important, but that's not the key. There's a very defined profession for security professional called application security in the past, application security team. They're no longer empowered as they used to be in handling the discussion with the developers and in determining what they need to fix and what they can ignore. And we try to steer back this very aggressive shift left, guys, take all the responsibility, developer teams, go and fix your thousands of vulnerability because it doesn't work. We try to steer back a little bit and have a model where the policies and the brains around security comes from the application security teams, and it makes their life of the developers very easy with evidence-based fixes rather than just cleaning up long list of vulnerabilities. So it's kind of a mindset shift. It very much resemble the cloud security change that we see in the industry right now, where the cloud security team with tools like Aqua, Wiz, Orca, they're very self-sufficient with handling the security findings. And they can bring facts and proofs and visuals around why something is important and why not. While the AppSec team keeps grooming and cleaning up long list of vulnerabilities for the last decade. So we try to bring them up to speed with a very unique tool set.
Yeah, and do you see that like alert fatigue is a big issue, right? You get these tons of alerts on vulnerabilities. Do you see that problem ever going away?
That's a good question. I think one of the problems as an industry in the last decade was, how do I know all the possible vulnerabilities in the code?
Yeah.
And this problem has been commoditized. You can get a decent open source and understand pretty well where all the vulnerabilities in your code and what is the list that you'll need to address. You know it's not going to be fixed you cannot fix everything. So once we acknowledge as an industry, it has been commoditized. I can understand very cheaply what are the problems that I have. The problems moves to what do I really need to fix and how. This is where the industry struggles today. Yeah. So it's not about having zero vulnerabilities. It's about fixing the right ones with the amount of budget and efforts you're dedicating for this problem.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I feel like that's the million-dollar question, kind of, right? Because everyone's got these alerts, but the real problem, as you said there, is actually, okay, what do we prioritize, what do we fix around that? And I guess that's why you guys can come in and potentially help, right?
For sure. It's funny that you mentioned money, and we have a very nice widget and a calculator of the return of investment of focusing on just the right ones you need to fix.
Okay.
And once we simulate for our customers, so you'll see the problem is much bigger than $1 million problem. If you get the industry standards, how much time, efforts, money you put on fixing your vulnerabilities in a year of a standard enterprise, it's much more than $1 million. It's tens of millions sometimes. And it's frustrating. It's not really converge into a sustainable solution.
Yeah, it's crazy. And going back to Backslash then, so you guys here at BlackHat, do you have any announcements or updates that you need to shout about, want to talk about, that you can say?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we're super proud about the fact that we're just announcing a new category in the hype cycle of AppSec around reachability analysis. So we were shortlisted around 5 or 6 more companies in that category. This is like a strong acknowledgement that the technology works and helps replacing previous generation platforms with our platform. Yep. So we don't come on top of the existing one, we're just replacing them. That's number one. Okay. Number two are, as I mentioned, we don't only prioritize for our customers, we also remediate and make the simulation of the fix. This is one of our new announcements. Everyone who will see that in the booth, whenever we demo this feature, it's like they know exactly how much time it saves them. So it's like something that really catches the eye and can translate for a real value for our customers. So we're very proud with announcing it recently. That's
very cool. What's your definition of reachability analysis?
Okay, so reachability analysis, it's being used in the industry for the last, 7, 8 years, and it can mean different things for different domains. For example, in cloud security, it can mean whether something is reachable from the internet, from the external interface. Reachability, when it comes to code, we break it to 2 things in Backslash. One is whether this package, this particular code, is actually being used in your application flows. Potentially, is there any static call that can call this package or not? If it's not being addressed from anywhere in your code, so it's not reachable. That's number one. Number two is there a path statically in the call stack coming from an API until the point the data is synced to the database that this vulnerability is part of? So when you combine these 2 things, the external reachability of the code from an API and the actual usage of the package, we call it the full attack path just by understanding the code. We don't need to simulate any running version of the application, we just need access to the Git, and we know exactly how the full reachability looks at the code. And this is one of the core technology that we were able to develop for the different modern languages and the previous generation languages.
That's great. And how the future looking then, how do you see specifically the AppSec, ASPM space playing out in the next maybe 1 to 2 years?
That's an interesting one. I think that we're going to see, for ASPM, when it just comes on top on the previous player, I think we're going to see a lot of convergence. We'll see M&As, companies being acquired by other bigger players that want to have a nice, clean dashboard. We've seen that with some of the players already. And there will be some disruptors of this technology altogether. So I think when we're talking to prospects and our customers, etc., there's an understanding that something needs to be changed. And a new leader will come up and probably going to take this market from technology point of view and not just from cleanups and prioritization based on static or anything else. So we hope it's going to be Backslash for sure. This is what we are targeting. But yeah, so we're going to see a lot of convergence, and we're going to see smart CISOs and head of AppSec betting on something else than just getting all the information into long lists.
Yeah, makes sense. And future looking for you guys, what's happening for the remainder H2 into next year as well? What are the goals or objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. So the company is growing very fast.
Yeah.
I know it's not 2019 and not that times, but still the company is growing. The technology is growing. We're supporting more and more customers. So now it's the challenge of a young startup to support your customers, and they got a lot of appetite. A lot of public companies in the US, they have a lot of appetite for new features once they see this technology. So we have a balancing act between making our customers happy, making them part of our journey and our making them excited about AppSec again, versus new features that helps us compete with all the bells and whistles of a new ASPM flashy dashboard. And there we got a lot of great feedback about how the user interface looks like, etc.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah,
some good milestones in the highlands that are coming, right? Okay, and to wrap this up, it's been great to have you on, Shahar, so I appreciate it. Now that you've founded your own startup, right, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone that wants to start their own cybersecurity vendor startup, what would that be?
Wow.
I can imagine there's loads, right? But if you had to summarize one thing, what's the one learning that you'd, or piece of advice you'd give?
Yeah, there's so many cliches in this domain. I can say you should fall in love with the problem and just vow to fix it rather than fall in love with your technology, because it's going to change a lot. But the real answer, I would give my son if he would start the startup tomorrow morning, is get your A-team, get your co-founder right, like a guy or a person, a co-founder you would love to work and spend long hours with for the rest of your that journey, and build an A-team around you very fast. Don't compromise there. Get less people, but at least get the A-team around you that you can get things done that seems impossible by that point in time. So that would be my first tip.
Yeah, well, people build companies, right? So it makes sense having that A-team in place.
For sure.
Cool. Well, Shahar, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me here in this nice place in Vegas.
You're welcome. It's great to have you on. See you soon. Thank you for listening to this very special BlackHat 2024 edition of Cyberbytes, the podcast. If you did enjoy the episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your colleagues and friends. If you're a candidate looking for a new role or a hiring manager looking for their next technical or GTM hire, then please reach out directly or via our company email info@aspironsearch.com.